Hello everyone! In the previous episode, we learned 3 ways to make a magic ring and how to crochet the first round. Single loop magic ring, double loop magic ring, and chain stitch magic ring. Plus, from earlier episodes, tube-shaped, oval-shaped, and using a circular object. Now we've finally covered all the basic starting methods for crocheting in the round. Of course, there are many other unique and interesting starting techniques. I'll introduce them in the future. Following up on the last episode, after we finished the first round of crocheting in the round, we got a circular piece like this. This episode won't cover the specific stitch patterns for round 2 and beyond just yet, because before that, I need to address one of the most frequently asked questions on my channel. Do you need to slip stitches when crocheting the head of a doll? Why is there no turning chain here? So in this episode, I'll introduce 2 ways to crochet after round 2, joint rounds and spiral rounds. Joined rounds means that after completing each round, you use a slip stitch to connect the end of the round to the beginning, forming a complete closed loop. Then you chain stitches as a turning chain to start the next round. Spiral rounds means you no longer use a slip stitch to close each round. Instead, you continue crocheting upward in a continuous spiral, like drawing a spiral line. Spiral rounds only use a turning chain at the very start of the first round and a slip stitch at the very end to finish. As we've covered before, crocheting in the round can create flat pieces or 3-dimensional shapes. To better demonstrate the 2 methods, we'll use a flat circular piece as an example. Joined rounds. Step 1. Joining. At the end of round 1, we use a slip stitch to connect the last stitch to the first stitch. The green stitch marker marks the first stitch of round 1, and the red marker marks the last stitch. Insert your hook into the first stitch. As shown by the arrow, yarn over. Pull the yarn through the first loop. Then pull the yarn through the second loop on the hook. Once you're more experienced, you can try yarning over and pulling through both loops at once. The slip stitch is complete. Round 1 is now a closed loop. Joined rounds. Step 2. Turning chains. Depending on which stitches you'll use in the next round, chain 1 to 3, 1 for SC, 2 for HDC, 3 for DC. In our demo, we're continuing with single crochet, so we only need 1 chain as a turning chain. Turning chain is done. Joined rounds. Step 3. Start round 2. The first stitch of round 2 goes into the same stitch where we just made the slip stitch. The stitch where we made the turning chain, i.e., the first stitch of round 1. Note, if we're crocheting HDC or DC, I've covered this in detail in previous episodes. For a more compact stitch, make 1 turning chain for HDC and do not skip the first stitch. For DC, make 2 turning chains and skip 1 stitch, not 2. In practice, some people skip none at all to avoid leaving a hole. Pay close attention. The first stitch already has a slip stitch and a turning chain worked into it, so it will be quite crowded. Many beginners, because it's so crowded, mistakenly work the first stitch into the next stitch instead. Use stitch markers to mark the first and last stitches to avoid this mistake. Now that we've found where to insert, since we're making a flat circular piece, not a 3D shape, in round 2 we need to crochet a single crochet increasing into every stitch. A single crochet increase means working to SC in the same stitch. See previous episodes for details. First SC done. Take a look at this stitch. There are 3 stitches worked into this 1 stitch. It's easy to get confused. Beginners often lose track of the first and last stitches, so please use stitch markers. Place a marker to mark this as the first stitch of round 2. Work another SC into the same stitch to complete the increase. The first SC increase is complete. Then work SC increases into every stitch, all the way to the last stitch of the previous round marked with the red marker. Now round 2 is complete. Remember to place a marker on the last stitch too. Then, at the end of every round, repeat the 3 steps we just demonstrated. Let's go through them once more. 1. Join with a slip stitch. 2. Crochet a turning chain. 3. Start the new round in the same stitch. Don't forget the stitch markers. Follow the diagram and crochet round by round. You'll end up with a circular piece like this. Important, in our demo, round 2 was all SC increases. But round 3 is not a repeat of round 2. I'll be posting a practice project with detailed diagrams soon, so you can practice with that. Spiral rounds a technique where you skip the slip stitches to get a seamless, smooth surface. So all we do is start round 2 directly, no slip stitches and no turning chains. Start the first stitch of round 2 right at the stitch marker. After making the first SC, immediately place a stitch marker. This helps you clearly see where each round begins and ends. Let's take a closer look. Then work another SC into the same stitch to complete the increase. The first SC increase is complete. Then work 1 SC increasing into every stitch, all the way to the last stitch of the previous round marked with the red marker. Round 2 is completed. Then follow the diagram and start round 3 directly, crocheting round by round, starting and ending at the markers. Keep spiraling upward. In the end, you'll get a circular piece like this. Finally, let's compare these 2 methods of crocheting in the round. The pink outer ring shows the difference in color change effects. First, the appearance. Joined rounds have clear, neat rounds that are easy to count. Every round has a clear start and end, great for beginners. The downside is a visible seam line. The slip stitches and turning chains can leave a straight ridge on the back or side of the piece. This ridge from the slip stitch can be minimized with special techniques. We'll make a dedicated video on that in the future. Stay tuned. Spiral rounds have no visible slip stitch marks. The surface looks cleaner and smoother. This technique is very useful for crocheting dolls, hats, bags, and other round 3D items. Now let's talk about color changes. We'll have a full video on that later. Color changes are very easy with joined rounds, since each round is a closed loop. You can switch colors perfectly at the join. No messy steps like you get with spiral rounds, perfect for striped patterns or complex color work. Color changes with spiral rounds are trickier, because spiral crochet naturally tilts the stitches, causing slight misalignment between rows. If you need frequent color changes, spiral rounds require more careful handling than joined rounds. Finally, let's look at finishing the edge. Joined rounds give you a flattering, neater edge. For taller stitches like DC, turning chains help make up the height difference for a cleaner edge. Spiral rounds, on the other hand, are structured as a continuous spiral. And since we don't use turning chains to compensate for height, there will be a slight height difference between the start and end of the final round. That's the comparison of the pros and cons of these 2 crochet in the round techniques. Choose whichever works best for your project. I'll be posting a practice project soon. Please keep supporting the channel. That's all for this episode. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.